Welcome to our Hyperfine corporate presentation, folks. Thank you for being here. So I'm Khan Siddiqui. I'm the Chief Medical Officer and Chief Strategy Officer at Hyperfine. And with me is our Chief Administrative Officer and Chief Financial Officer, Brett Hale. I'll cover the initial part of the presentation, and then Brett will carry on after that. It's a small group. Let's make it interactive. If you have questions, interrupt, ask. We should keep it more lively. So just a little bit of my background. I'm a diagnostic radiologist, serial entrepreneur. I've worked in academia for my first 10 years of my life as a director of MR at Hopkins and University of Maryland. Then moved to industry at Microsoft, mostly focused on machine learning, computer vision application in healthcare and outside healthcare, and founded a bunch of the companies that successfully exited. Brett's had a long career in consulting, and then after that as being a CFO and financing in different MedTech companies in the past, and he'll give a little bit more introduction when he starts. Do I need to read this? Okay. So Hyperfine really started in 2014, 2015 timeframe to this mission to revolutionize, patient care globally through making accessible technologies and diagnostic imaging and data that is actionable at the point of care. It was a very broad vision, and one of the first technologies we started with was focused on a portable MRI scanner. So if you go through the history of MR scanners, in the 70s and early 80s, the MR imaging really started with the first scanner that you see on the screen here from Aberdeen, which was a permanent magnet-based scanner. And then in 1986, Picker International, which became GE Healthcare later on, commissioned the first superconducting 1.5 Tesla magnet, and the arm race to build bigger and bigger, higher and higher Tesla MR scanners started, requiring a lot of expertise to use it, a lot of power to use it, almost like a nuclear submarine related power, and a lot of the safety related consideration that came into play. So we are starting this new revolution of MR 2.0 or 3.0, if you want to think of it that way, where we are bringing in the 40 years of improvement, compute power, machine learning, AI to bring this MR scanner to the patient's bedside and make it portable and easily movable to a point of care scenario. So taking this akin to like a mainframe to a laptop analogy, that's what we're doing with MR imaging. It completely changes the paradigm how this is done. If you think of it, 90% of the world does not have access to point of care advanced diagnostics, right? MR, CT, or anything like that. And it requires a lot of infrastructure typically to deploy an MR scanner. You need a special room, special HVAC, a lot of safety consideration on the patients to be able to do this stuff. And what leads to, you only see MR scanners in tertiary care centers or dedicated imaging centers that are purpose-built for this purpose. Now the whole paradigm changes. Now the device can actually go to the patient's bedside in the ICU or another outpatient setting in the clinic, can go in a community setting and a pre-hospital kind of imaging used in research and epidemiological studies, or even go into and address access issues in rural communities and low middle income settings where you may have health deserts, even in developed countries also. So it completely opens up the whole market that previously was restricted to tertiary care centers and dedicated imaging centers. And it has been pretty significant innovative technologies we had to do to make this possible. With over 100 issued patents on this technology, we really took this idea of bringing MR scanner to the bedside by inventing multiple different things. One of the biggest things we invented was, how do you actually do imaging when your magnetic field is not homogeneous? How do you do imaging when there's so much electromagnetic noise in the room from all the devices in the room, the phones in people's pockets and pagers and monitors and everything like that? And we really focused on thinking through who will benefit the most, where the value is the most. And it really becomes the critical care patient in the ICU that just doesn't have an option for any imaging at the bedside. We got our first clearance during the pandemic in 2020. It was interesting to launch a medical device during a pandemic. We have over 100 units deployed by the end of 2022 and doing more. And because it's an MR and does all the same sequence that high field does, it has same reimbursement codes that a typical high field MR would have. We've now had over 20 peer-reviewed publications published, more coming, and this year, and there's just been an exponential increase in utilization. And there are some of the quotes from our advisory board members and some of the luminaries in the field. I'm not going to read these, but you can tell excitement in the clinical community is there. There have been multiple major publications in JAMA, in Nature, and other journals about the benefits and use of this technology. The interesting thing, when you think about medical technologies come out, it always kind of fits in one stakeholders, but it kind of goes against another stakeholder. But in this scenario, it's actually benefiting every stakeholder, all the way from the patient to the physicians, to the MR techs and nursing staff, as well as to the hospital. So for a patient, it reduced the risk of adverse event of a patient in ICU who's on ventilators, on multiple monitors, and multiple IV therapies. How do you move the patient? And most of these patients end up getting adverse events. It improves on that because of replacing CT with MR. You're reducing exposure to radiation in these patients. From a physician point of view, it provides immediate point of care diagnostic, immediate results on what is happening to the patient on the bedside. So they don't have to wait now the patient to go down to the radiology department and then radiologist dictates reports and report comes back to your electronic health record and can take a very long time. Nursing staff is a big one. We already have nursing shortages. Now if a patient in the ICU has to go to the radiology department, it has to go with the nurse, the respiratory therapist, and all those folks. This way the nurse can stay with the patient in the ICU, take care of the other patient at the same time while the scan is happening at the bedside. And obviously, it helps the hospital by reducing length of stay for these ICU patients, reducing adverse events because of lack of, no need to transport these patients. And what else it does is, a typical ICU patient, when it goes to radiology, it takes 3 times the time moving the patient around back and forth. So now you can do 3 other outpatient images or other low-risk inpatient imaging on that high-field scan that previously were only doing 1 because of this. So it opens up significant amount of capacity in your current imaging systems also. And our focus really became when we started, where do we focus? How do we think about this stuff and where the technology adoption we think will be faster? And we honed down onto the critical care patient because they are the most challenging, and that's where the incumbents don't really have a solution, right? And we wanted to provide that solution to those critically ill patients. How is a critically ill patient? Usually comatose, usually ventilated, not able to verbalize what's going on. Do you know how physicians assess patient's neurological status if he's comatose? By pressing hard on the sternum to see if they twitch or wince. That's our standard of care today on how to assess what's happening in the brain. So here we're completely changing that and providing them a tool that they can see exactly what's happening in the brain. And there are multiple use cases in the critical care scenario, but once you enable point of care imaging, a lot of these patients who are comatose, their mental status changes for some reason. We don't know the cause of it. Could be organic, could be metabolic. And one of the things that you want to avoid is to make sure there's no new hemorrhage or no new bleed that is happening so that can be treated immediately. So imaging becomes a very important cause in those scenarios. Any kind of infection happening can be detected, bleeds, increase in the ventricular size because the cerebrospinal fluid is not flowing properly, and a lot of other conditions that can happen in a critical care scenario can be easily assessed through the device. So here's the interesting workflow, right? So I don't know how many people have seen, this used to be my nightmare scenario every single day when I was in clinical practice, was how many steps it took to get an ICU patient done. And I can count more than my 2 hands how many times patient coded or rested in an elevator or in the hallway during this transport at Hopkins and Maryland. So typically on average, an ICU patient in a conventional scenario takes about 11 and a half hours, almost 12 hours to get the results back. From the order to the results availability, that's how long it takes on an ICU patient getting imaging done. And it's a very complex transport. Getting the patient from their hospital bed to the transport bed to the ICU to to the radiology department, to the MR bed, and then reverse all that stuff back. And takes just very long, poor outcomes and high cost. 1 in 3 patients had adverse events that cost hospital on average $6,000 in this MR transport scenario. Here are all the steps. I'm not going to go through all the stuff, but there are just tons and tons of steps. Even to just think from a nursing point of view, right? If an order is placed, the nurse has to first figure out who are the patients if I'm going to go down with the radiologist, with the patient to radiology department, who are the other patients I'm taking care of. I have to sign off all those patients to some other nurse while I'm outside the ICU. So it's not just the patient that is getting disrupted. The entire workflow of the ICU gets disrupted when a patient leaves the ICU. And just takes too many steps to get these results done. And what we are doing with our device is you drive the device to the patient's room, patient is prepped, slid in the scanner, nobody has to go anywhere, scan is complete, results are available right at the bedside, and the scanner goes back in the closet. Simple as that, right? So we could take this 20 plus step process and bring it down to 3 steps, more than 55% reduction in time spent. So here's a just video overview of the scanner itself. Is that right? And then I'll continue from here.
Swoop is a portable MRI system that allows clinicians to take pictures of a patient's brain without the patient leaving their room. The system enables physicians to access those images within minutes instead of hours. Hyperfine designed the Swoop system to ensure low risk to the operator, patient, and nearby medical staff or family members. Swoop does not use ionizing radiation to generate images, unlike portable CT and X-ray devices. To begin imaging, ICU nurses will gently slide the patient into the transparent head coil. During the scan, the patient will hear low-level rhythmic tones and should remain as still as possible. Nurses will move the patient out of Swoop when the scan is complete. Finally, the Swoop system will be removed from the room, and in a few minutes, the completed images will be uploaded, and the clinician will be notified when the results are available for viewing.
Great. Let's see. So one of the reasons, how are we able to do this, right? How come nobody else has done it? How is Hyperfine able to do this? Is how we thought about using machine learning and AI, deep learning, to really do image reconstruction. So what we do is we replace the process that typically traditional scanner use called fast Fourier transform, and we build a deep learning-based reconstruction methodology that takes in all the raw signal coming in from the MR device itself and using deep learning and AI to generate these images that are agnostic quality, and also remove noise from the environment during that process also. That's what gives us the edge, and the compute power, increase in compute capacity, and all these advancements that have happened in deep learning is what has enabled possibility of creating these diagnostic quality images. I can go a lot more deeper in this because I get geeky about this stuff, but we will go, yes?
Is the deep learning algorithm from data acquisition all the way through, or is it after you do pre-processing to get a higher image quality?
So the initial reconstruction is happening before the image is generated. So it's happening at the case space level. So the raw signal coming from all the 8 channels in the coil, we apply on that. Then the denoising is happening at the image level. So there are 2 different algorithms.
So the denoising is where you use deep learning?
No, we use deep learning in the replacing fast Fourier transform to do this. So it's happening at that. It's happening in both levels, but the main one that generates the image is a deep learning algorithm that is replacing fast Fourier transform to a neural network, CNN-based reconstruction method.
Wow. Did it take a long time to develop that, curiously? It's not like you put it...
They started 2015 and got clearance 2020, so 5 years of R&D to get there.
Yeah. It would be easier now, though, right? With the tools, or no?
What do you mean, like?
Because of how much more advanced the tools keep getting?
I think we build our own network from scratch to do this. So absolutely right. With the newer techniques, it get even better. Yes. Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you think of an MR, right? MR signals generated continuously.
Yeah.
But because we don't have enough compute power, we subsample the data.
Sure.
So as compute power gets better, as our algorithms get better, technology gets better, we'll be able to sample more and more. Our SNR will go up exponentially as the rest of the technology improves. Absolutely.
What's the magnet size?
0.06 Tesla.
Wow.
It's same as refrigerator magnet
Yeah.
compared to the 1 23 times less field strength.
And the image is similar to standard conventional MRI?
I'm going to show next slide, sample of images. So the other thing that we are a very different medical device company. We are more like a software company that rapidly releases software. So we build our quality management system, our regulatory process such a way that we can do rapid iteration of software. As you can see, just last year we did 5 releases and 5 after 510(k) clearances, which is unheard of in medical device space, doing that many clearances. These are the clearance releases that required FDA submission. And there are countless subletter to file releases that are happening behind this, right? Which not every single release requires FDA clearance. So getting 510(k) clearances is not seen. So that's how we're able to iterate very fast and take advantage of all the rapid improvements that are happening in technology and incorporate into our device. I just have one case here. It's a patient, 70-year-old in the ICU. I previously had intraparenchymal hemorrhage that presented with suspected new hemorrhage, was in the ICU, critically ill, intubated, and receiving vasosuppressors in there. And because the patient's altered mental status changed, the physician wanted to see what is going on here. And if you can see this, typically what happens in hemorrhage that happens, usually the blood contents are the same age, either deoxyhemoglobin or methemoglobin that is developed. So the signal is uniform in the hemorrhage. But what is happening here, if I can do this, is a lot of gray and white mixed together. That means there's active bleeding happening. So the multi-stage hemorrhages happen. So this is basically showing that this blood is still evolving. There's still more bleeding happening in the scenario. So not only we rely just on the size of an hemorrhage, but also the signal changes that are happening in the hemorrhage. That's what helps us understand that there's continuing hemorrhage in this patient's case. So perfect example of how an ICU patient may be impacted by something like this. Here's some of the full sequences that we have. So diffusion imaging. So diffusion imaging really helps us understand if the patient has a stroke or not. So in this scenario, it doesn't look like patients develop any surrounding stroke other than the hemorrhage that we already see. And then the FLAIR and T1 images that are in addition to what I already showed. So I'll play this video from one of our customers talking about this, and then Brett will take over from here.
Does that answer your question about the sequence and the?
Hi, I'm Dr. Daniel Coria. I'm the Director of Neuroscience at CarePoint. I'm a stroke neurologist, so a neurologist by training, did some extra training in stroke and neurocritical care. So my role here basically is to take care of the sickest patients who come in with strokes and bleeds. Portable MRI is something I never had to explain before because it's brand new. But when we talk to patients about it, it's basically bringing the test to the patient. It's something that I believe is safer. Moving the patient around that's critically ill is always a hassle, always a problem. Nursing is really put on the spot because they have to make sure nothing goes wrong with the transport. So imagine all of that coordination that goes into play, and now you're also diverting that from other patients. In this case, if you can bring the MRI to the patient, you save a lot of time, you save a lot of potential mishaps that can happen, and then it's so much more comfortable for the patient, and we get the answer right away at bedside. We can make the decision right then.
My name is David Pro. I'm an interventional neurologist, and I'm part of the stroke team, the neurovascular team here at Christ Hospital. Once we see a patient with a clinical syndrome, imaging really is what allows us to move that patient quickly and linearly through a process to get them definitive treatment. What the Swoop allows us to do is have immediate access to real-time imaging of cerebral tissue to determine whether or not it's infarcted. Clinically, this is invaluable, specifically because oftentimes our patients are very sick, they're very ill. Moving them around the hospital, even with skilled transporters, does pose a problem. The ability to have very quick, reliable imaging done in the patient's room while they're in a monitored setting, being monitored by the same team of nurses and doctors and intensive care doctors that take care of them, is really a huge benefit. And it allows us to get that information that we need rapidly in order to make logical clinical decisions. In essence, imaging has allowed us to create what I like to call neuro-EKG. By being able to get imaging quickly, reliably, and have it be done in a way that we can rapidly relay that information to the treatment team, allows us to select patients for treatment that otherwise in the past would have been, the time it would have taken them to get to that treatment would have been longer. Having the Swoop gives us a whole new level of options. The ability to perform basically MRI on demand, regardless of patient location, patient stability, just allows us to get the best idea of what is going on in that patient's head whenever the need for that information arises.
Great. So as Khan introduced at the beginning, I'm Brett Hale. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer and Chief Financial Officer here at Hyperfine. And so I want to spend the rest of this presentation, get a little bit more corporate overview and some of our priorities and initiatives. So we talk about three corporate strategic priorities that we have in laser focus for our organization. It's innovation, clinical evidence, and commercial expansion. And so these are the bedrocks of everything that we do here, and we really put all of our initiatives and efforts under those umbrella. So we'll go through some of the details in each one of these. Yes?
You okay with the picture?
What's that?
Are you okay with the picture?
I'm okay with the picture, yes. Thank you for asking. On innovation, so we have a clear roadmap of innovation, and as Khan indicated, we've got innovation going across the spectrum. So we've got software innovations, we've got deep learning and AI innovations, we've got hardware innovations, bringing all these together to make an ecosystem that works best in terms of the image and the patient and provider efficiency. We have a robust amount of IP that we have in our innovation, and we've got strong partnerships. So we have a multi-year partnership that we've had with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and we've got a partnership with Viz AI. They're part of our innovation thresholds and activities that we have as an organization. On the clinical evidence side, we've got Khan talked about the critical care. So we have a lot of our focus is on the critical care side of the business and the clinical evidence that supports the use of the Swoop system. We're also going into stroke imaging. So our Action PMR activities are focused on stroke imaging, and that's an activity that we're embarking on here in 2023. And as we talked about before, we have an extensive amount of publications and podium presentations at various conferences that really brings the scientific community and the clinical community together about what innovation is taking place, the use of the Swoop system, how they're finding the clinical utility. On the commercial expansion is another one of our pillars. We're really heavily focused on the U.S. That is our primary commercial focus here today, although we look at to the out years for commercial expansion internationally. We've implemented a new commercial structure. We've implemented new processes to bring Swoop to U.S. customers. And we're very proud of the pipeline that we've developed and what we'll see here in 23 and beyond. Throughout, overarching all of this is a very core focus on spending discipline and cash runway. So we're very focused on making sure that we have the capital to execute upon our business plan. So we've been very focused on where we invest our money and being very focused on cash preservation. we have now a runway for our business through the end of 2025, which gives us the time to execute upon all three of these strategic pillars. So we're heavily investing in these areas, but we're doing so to make sure that we have the capital to get through the end of 2025. In terms of the market size, it's a very large market opportunity. You can think about where Swoop can be. It can be used in a variety of different clinical settings, different hospitals. So you can see a world where hundreds of thousands could be deployed at various places. You translate that into a very large addressable market. So we're operating in a very large space. Imaging in totality is a large space, and we're transforming medical imaging by bringing things to point of patient and point of care. So we talked about critical care. That is our current really laser focus on our commercial side. So we talk about it in the context of neuroimaging and critical care. And when you think about neuroimaging, that's beyond the neuro ICU. It actually transforms into all areas of critical care. And so this is a depiction of where you can see in the various critical care functions, whether that is the neuro ICU, the ECMO, pediatric ICUs. Swoop can play a role in each one of those critical care areas within the U.S. hospital systems. But critical care is our focus today, but we see the Swoop being applicable in a variety of different use cases. So stroke is an area that we see that we'll be bringing Swoop to technology. Pediatrics, neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's and MS is an area of focus over the long term, and bringing the technology even further beyond just the brain to C-spine is something that long term we'll be pursuing. We built an innovation engine to support all these expansions in terms of our clinical case. So we have the software development, we get the hardware development, really a full ecosystem that tackles what is needed to drive towards good use in these different clinical use cases. So a little bit about our financial profile as a business. As Con indicated, we got FDA clearance in 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. Upon launch, we've seen a nice steady increase of our revenue growth year over year. For 2023, our guidance is somewhere between the range of 10 to 14 million, so a nice increase over last year. We talked about being really conscious about spending. I think that's very important in today's capital markets. So we've been very conscious about where we spend our money. So we've been able to bring down our spending here in 2023, really focusing on making sure we have a capital runway through the end of 2025. Our current guidance is between 40 to 45 million cash burn for 2023. Management team. So two of us are here today. We have a lean but very effective management team with a proven track record led by our CEO, Maria Sainz. And so we're very proud to be presenting here at Yale, here in the great state of Connecticut. We have really strong roots here in Connecticut as well as with the Yale University. So as Con indicated, we were founded in 2014. Dr. Jonathan Rothberg, he's our founder of Hyperfine as well as many other companies here in the state of Connecticut. He's a Yale alumni, so I think he's very proud for us to be presenting here today. We're headquartered in Connecticut, so for those that are not familiar, we're in Guilford, Connecticut, so we're just not very far down the road to the east from New Haven here. And we've done research globally, but Yale has been one of our critical partners in the journey, so we've got a lot of deep roots and connections to Yale. We're very proud to be here today. While we have deep roots in this local geography, we believe we're impacting the world. And so through our select distributor partners, which we have a handful in the world, as well as our efforts with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundations, we've had deployment of our Swoop technology in over a dozen countries throughout the world, many of them in the low and middle income countries in Africa and Asia. So while we're focused commercially in the United States, we've had a global reach in terms of where we've taken technology to date. So just in closing, the Swoop system, brings MRI to point of patient. It brings it to the point of care of clinical decision making. It enables clinicians to make rapid diagnosis and be able to triage patients to make clinical decisions there without that long wait that Con talked about earlier in the presentation. It really does in a variety of different settings. It can work in the acute setting, it can work in the intensive care, and it can work in global health. So we feel like we've got a platform technology that can really play a broad role in a variety of different settings and locations throughout the world. So with that was our formal presentation. We're happy to take questions at this point in time.
Sure.
Just curiously, how does it work with the superconductor coolant? Like, how often do you have to reach
We
fill
don't
it?
have, it's a permanent magnet, there's no superconductor.
Oh, yeah, it's only 0.06 Tesla or something.
It's a permanent magnet.
Permanent magnet. And is there any concern with like pacemakers and stuff, or not really? It's too light.
So as long as pacemaker is cleared under, for anything below, for our field strength, no issues. And as long as it's outside the 5 Gauss line of the scanner, which is really 2.5 feet from the center, no issues with that.
So the image quality is more or less as good as what you would get in a conventional system?
We're trying to replace, the signal is slightly different just because of the field strength. It's been frequency different hydrogen atoms. But like our images, the in-plane resolution is 1.5 millimeter, 1.5 millimeter convention, so it's
good enough.
I think that's the key thing, is good enough to make a clinical decision.
Yeah, sure.
That's really what you're bringing it to, point of care, point of patient, having the image quality and the information to make that clinical decision.
And how long does it take to process an image?
So like T2-weighted sequence is 2.5 minutes.
2.5. And what would be like a GE scanner, be curiously?
GE scanner has faster ones, so it may take about a minute or so to do.
Yeah.
But the good thing for us is that we start showing images with just 10% data collected.
Yeah, it
so
keeps
we
building
don't.
up.
So in conventional scanner today, you have to wait till the sequence is complete before you see image on the console. We are actually showing you as data is being captured, improving. So even though 2.5 minutes complete sequence, you are seeing the results immediately within a minute.
Do you have like a, is it processed in the cloud or is it locally right there?
It's being locally. There's a GPU-based machine at the bottom of the scanner that does all the local processing.
And could you speed it up by bigger hardware, or you have big GPUs?
I mean, we're using NVIDIA Jetson right now, and as that grows, it'll definitely get better.
It's faster. What's the price point, or how do you monetize it? If you can say, or more or less.
Yeah, we don't give exact price points, but we talk about in the public. We have a blend of different channels in the U.S. We're obviously a direct sell point. So think about it. We sell it twofold. There's a capital equipment element. So there's basically acquisition of the capital equipment, and there's an ongoing service and support element of that. We've actually, we've modified our commercial model throughout the years, and so actually in 2023 we've increased the price of the device. What we find is that price is not the issue with the customers. We're bringing so much value to the table. It's really about getting the different constituents together, making sure they understand the clinical use case. But we're not seeing a pricing being an issue necessarily.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, it's a significantly different price point than a high field scanner, for sure.
Yeah, sure. It's like, yeah.
And we're going to places where the high field scanner can go in terms of the patients getting access to technology.
And is it getting used once it gets purchased?
Yeah, that's obviously the value is it. You're champion. You're working for all the different constituents, and you want them to be able to use it for a variety of use cases. And so there's a collaboration that takes place post purchase. We do something we call HYPR Week, where we bring in the technical experts. We get a lot of the different constituents within the hospital system together, train them on it, and make sure they understand the use of it. And then obviously we're always touching back with that account to make sure they're getting the value that they thought from that. I don't know if Connie has anything to add to that.
Greg can capture all the stuff. We do very high touch for the first month or so, and then we have regular image reviews with radiology folks as well as the neurocritical care folks as their needs come into play. They ask a lot of questions about different devices and things like that. And so, as some of the work we're doing ECMO probably is the most complex scenario in an ICU you can think of. Those patients are completely contraindicated to get CT or MR in those scenarios, and we're able to do imaging as long as the machines are outside of 5 Gauss line. That's been pretty tremendous.
I'm familiar with Butterfly too. Like I don't know if it was you or Dr. Rothberg or everybody together, but it's like when you all think about a product, did you start off and think, well, what is the use case, or or what are the various use cases, or did you start off when you first ideating on something like this and say, it would be cool to make a small portable MRI? Like what direction did you all
We
start?
started with the problem first.
Was that?
Start with the problem first.
You did.
So when the statement in 2014 or 2013, as the AI hype was starting and a lot of people were making case, one of the most common stats Dr. Rothberg was seeing was 90% of the world doesn't have access to advanced imaging, and the question became why.
Yeah.
The other thing was that he himself had went through where he had to get multiple MRs done. repeatedly, and he kept asking, like, why do I have to go down to the basement to do this stuff? Why can't we do it out here? And in that discovery, the ideation started like, hey, this needs to be solved. Because why do I have to take my kid every time there? Why do I have to go every time there? And why doesn't the world have access to this stuff? And in that journey led to talking to a lot of experts, figuring out how to solve the problem. That's where we connect to some clinicians at Yale, at MGH, at University of Maryland, put a team of scientists and engineers together to see like how would we solve this problem. And from that came ultra low field, initially ultra low field imaging, and then it's like, well, yeah, we can install in a room in ICU, but wouldn't it be great if it's on wheels? I think I forget who actually said that. And that's where the whole portability thing came out of that.
Yeah. Really cool.
Yes?
You mentioned like in your future directions trying to image other body parts to like moving down to C-spine. And I'm wondering what the like roadblocks to developing technology that can do that are.
Yeah, so I mean, on that wheel of use cases, really you can think about those in terms of our priorities. So we're in the critical care space today. Stroke is something that we're actively working on here in 2023, and then neurodegenerative and pediatrics is next. C-spine, is something that we're mostly focused on the head today. So when you get into C-spine, you're going head and neck, and so we're primarily focused on the head today. So there's obviously some advancements that you would need to do as you think about broader indication, but right now we're focused mostly on the head.
So your indications are for the head as well. Is that because the neural net is focused on the reconstruction is for the head, or that you could apply the reconstruction to anything?
We can apply reconstruction to anything because it's applying it on the waveform level, so it doesn't really make a difference. It's not looking at image features.
Got it.
But I think about the head, there's such a massive opportunity in the head. That's where our primary focus is.
Yeah, plus you stick the head into that little head thing.
Helmet.
The helmet.
Yes.
Could you explain a little bit about how that services and technology exchange works between Butterfly or among Butterfly, Hyperfine, and the innumerable other companies that
Can you maybe elaborate on that question? Just you're talking about like the relationships between like Hyperfine and
can you market your Hyperfine with Butterfly using the same sales force, and can you borrow scientists from one company to the other because you have that agreement that all the companies can share?
Yeah, I'll take that. I mean, at a foundation, we're all separate companies. Early on, there obviously was a lot of, they all came out of the same incubator. So Hyperfine, QSI, and Butterfly. But there's not necessarily a lot of active sharing, in terms of as we stand as, standalone publicly traded companies. So there's not necessarily sharing as scientists necessarily. There are some things that are of common nature that can tend to be shared, but we don't share Salesforce. We only have active programs to co-market or bring things together. Although originally they all came out of the same incubator. There's definitely much more collaboration earlier on as the earlier stages of each one of those companies. I don't know if you were.
Yeah, but since I've been here for almost 2.5 years, there's not been any active collaboration between the companies. But before that, there's a change was that. In the early stage, ideation stuff was happening. There was collaboration, but not anymore. They're completely independent companies. Yes.
Just curious for you. I know you haven't been through the whole process, but as you've changed from a private to a public company, how have things changed? Is business as usual for you? Is it a leap? Is it a change? Are there things that are good or annoying or bad?
I think it's good. The discipline has come in because now we have this everybody looking at how we're performing. So I think that has been really, really good. Has made us laser focused. Otherwise, and we don't have shiny object syndrome anymore. That we tend to, as a private company, you tend to go explore things that may not be doing it. I think that's been really, really good from that point of view. I think what else do you want to add anymore?
No, I mean, I think we still have the same entrepreneurial spirit. You know, we're still a relatively, nimble and, small company. So even though we're public, we still have the ethos of, follow innovation, make sure we're focused. I think, the articulation of our use cases and our pipeline, that's small company. We move nimbly, we move fast. But we have, still, I think the discipline that you get from being a publicly traded company. So I think we try to take the best of both worlds. But obviously, there's obviously, you're in a different, disclosure, element when you're a publicly traded company versus a private company. So, but that's just part of the nature of being a publicly traded company.
Nature of the beast, right?
That's right. Any other questions?
Anybody seen the machine or used it or been close to it? No? Go to the Yale ICU, you'll see 2 of them there.
Wow.
I try and stay out of those ICUs, but when I'm there, I'll check it out.
Yeah, I always say that I've worked for a lot of companies. I'm like, I never want to necessarily have the product used on me, but I'm glad that those products and technologies exist for sure. So.
Share contact info and ticker symbol?
What's that?
Yeah,
Share how they can reach out to us?
Sure. If anybody wants to reach out to either me or Khan, we can provide contact information. If anybody's interested in further discussions, you can come up here, we can share information. We also have our investor website that has contact information for reaching out. Just if anybody's an investor wants to know more information, we can facilitate, further conversations.
Ticker symbol.
What's that?
Ticker symbol.
Ticker symbol is HYPR.
They're on the picture.
There we go.
Thank you. It's awesome.
Thank you for attending.